odds for a F1 driver to stick around in the driver's lineup for nearly a decade are actually really slim, somewhere around the 25% mark. For example, in 2012, out of the 24 drivers back then, only 6 of them are driving right now in 2021, and those are Kimi Raikkonen, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, and Lewis Hamilton, who are world champions, plus the addition of Sergio Perez and Daniel Ricciardo. Both of them are Grand Prix winners. So basically, you have to be at least a Grand Prix winner to stick around for a longer period of time. And in today's video, I will predict who will stick around until 2030, because that's right, I like to keep up with these 9-year gaps. So let's get right into this. First of all, I would like to put a couple of people in brackets here. Those are the rookies, because I simply wouldn't like to judge them. I don't think it would be correct for me to judge them. Now, if you would put a gun to my head, I would say Mazepin, probably no. Mick Schumacher, actually, I think no. Yuki Tsunoda, yes. Advantage Yuki Tsunoda. And I know it sounds like a complete knee-jerk reaction for me, but when you look at the great F1 champions of present and future, you see Lewis Hamilton having 9 straight podiums to start his F1 career. You see Max Verstappen winning his first race in Red Bull. You see Sebastian Vettel winning a race in Toro freaking Rosso. So it's really important to start off fast, to start off quickly, because yes, you can develop, you can be something like a Sergio Perez, but then you actually have to pray to God for a seat 9 years later in a F1, because it all depends if there is a Jack Aitken crash, there is a George Russell slow puncture, there is a Valtteri Bottas completely butchered pit stop, and then you can perhaps win a race, and then you can perhaps get an F1 seat. Age isn't just a number when it comes to the F1 drivers, therefore we are going to have a couple of easy no's to start off the little bit more experienced drivers part. First of all, I don't think that a 51-year-old Kimi Raikkonen will be driving around in 2030. Same goes with Fernando Alonso. I don't think that his 50 laps around the sun will help his case to stick around until the 2030 season. I didn't include the potentially 40-year-old Sergio Perez, the 41-year-old Valtteri Bottas, and the 41-year-old Daniel Ricciardo, but I did include the 45-year-old Lewis Hamilton. And you can say, well, Tom Brady's winning and he is 43 years old, but I don't think that Lewis will stick around until 2030. Even if he could, I think Lewis will be interested in fashion, in modeling, and maybe a little bit of Hollywood. Now, I did include Sebastian Vettel, who would be 43 years old, and when you think about it, his prime was in 2013, so a 17-year gap to his prime. Yeah, I don't think that Sebastian Vettel will be driving around in 2030. And we are left with 13 drivers to debate. First of all, it's Antonio Giovinazzi. Now, the first thing here about Gio is that he's not actually that young. He's 27 years old. He would be 36, 37, turning 37 in 2030. And he has had roughly the same results as his ancient 41-year-old fossilized teammate who had his prime 15 years ago. So yeah, Antonio Giovinazzi, and I know that he's driving in a shitty car, but so does George Russell, and George Russell is producing excellent results. He is destroying his teammate. So I think this is one of the easiest choices here. It's a no next to Antonio Giovinazzi. Now, Esteban Ocon. I understand that Esteban Ocon has had a rough period in F1, rough stretch of teammates, and of course not having a seat. First of all, it was Sergio Perez, then not having a seat, then Daniel Ricciardo, and possibly the toughest opponent up to this point, Fernando Alonso. But besides the Perez year, I think he's just getting outclassed. Ricciardo was destroying him, and it's only been 1 year in the Alpine, but he has been in the team longer than Fernando Alonso, and one race, only one race, you can see the class in Fernando, and you can see that Esteban Ocon is pretty much, in my opinion, just a guy driving around. I know a lot of you will disagree with me, but I don't think that Esteban Ocon right now is a top 10 driver. I think he's around the 12th best driver in F1. Therefore, it's a no next to Esteban Ocon. Now, next up, again, a easy choice. But on the other side, yes, for Max Verstappen, he doesn't even need to win a world championship because he's already a top 2 driver and everybody would love to sign him, and he would be only 33 years old in 2030, just as his car number. Now, Sergio Perez, I was actually thinking about this perhaps a little bit longer than I should have or you would expect. If Sergio Perez somehow wins a World Drivers' Championship, I could clearly see him 40 years old driving around in a F1 car, but he's facing Max Verstappen, and I don't think he's capable of beating Max Verstappen, and I don't think there will be another great opportunity for Sergio Perez in a different car to win a World Drivers' Championship. Therefore, here is a no next to Sergio Perez's head. Valtteri Bottas is the next guy on the picture, and in my opinion, Valtteri's career is kind of reminiscing of Rubens Barrichello's. Great, solid number 2 driver, stuck next to a generational talent and a generational champion. And yes, I know that Rubens drove around until he was 39 years old, but Bottas, as I previously mentioned, would be 41. I think he would be just too expensive, not motivated enough, and yeah, I think he just simply wouldn't be attractive for any of the 10 or maybe even more teams to sign when it comes to 2030. So there is a no next to Valtteri Bottas, but there is a yes next to Charles Leclerc, who's a top 3 driver right now, and same as with Max Verstappen, he doesn't even need to win a World Drivers' Championship to stick around. He's a multiple Grand Prix winner, and yeah, I think this is easy when it comes to Charles. He will be only 33 years old in 2030. Now, when it comes to Carlos Sainz, I just never saw anything special in Carlos Sainz. To me, he's a definition of 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 driver. He does everything well. He's a good driver. He's like a Valtteri Bottas. But to me, there is nothing elite, nothing special that will stick out when it comes to Carlos Sainz. And it all depends if he gets to drive a championship winning Ferrari, then perhaps he could win a race or two. But Ferrari right now is possibly the 4th best team on the grid. And yeah, I just don't see it in Carlos Sainz. I know his father is like 60 or 70 years old, still driving around. But of course, that's not the F1. So I don't see Carlos Sainz being on the F1 paddock in 2030. And one more thing, Carlos Sainz has been always overlooked. First, it was Max Verstappen, then it was Lando Norris, and then right now it's possibly Mick Schumacher. So nobody seems to really trust, nobody seems to have faith in this guy when it comes to long-term planning. So yeah, this is a no next to Carlos Sainz. Next up, Daniel Ricciardo. So let's think about Daniel. He would be 41 years old. And Kimi is 41. But the difference between Kimi and Daniel, of course, Kimi is a world champion, Daniel isn't. But let's say they will have roughly the same career. Kimi could always go to Alfa Romeo because he was driving in Ferrari for ages. Daniel is always changing teams. And let's say Daniel Ricciardo driving in Toro Rosso in 2030, that would sound, or Alpha Tauri, I apologize. That would sound so weird. That would be so weird. And I don't think that Daniel Ricciardo will win the Drivers' Championship. And simply, I just don't see Daniel Ricciardo being on the F1 grid in 2030. Now, next up, Lando Norris. Lando Norris has grown on me because I was kind of a doubter in the beginning. I found him too goofy. But his performances have been great. His off-track stuff has been great. I really like Lando Norris. I don't think, or maybe I don't know. I don't know if he will be a future world champion. Maybe, maybe not. But he is tremendously improving. He is super young. He would be only 31 years old in 2030. So I think this is a yes next to Lando Norris. Lance Stroll is the next guy on this picture, and first of all, Lance would be only 32 years old come 2030, therefore he would be really young, especially compared to the rest of the drivers on this picture. Now, just a couple of things about Lance, couple of facts with my personal opinion, my personal take added on top of that. In my opinion, Lance is a perfectly normal, perfectly nice, regular, everyday dude. He's a little bit shy, he's a little bit introverted. He just happens to be born in a rich family, and he's getting a lot of hate because of that. And I understand why, but it's just so stupid. Do you realize that he cannot choose his father? Do you realize that he cannot talk to God? He cannot go back into 1998 and tell the God, hey man, I don't want to have a rich daddy. I want to have a poor daddy just so I can get respected, or I can be respected by the F1 community and the F1 fans. It's just so stupid. And when it comes to his performances, he has been improving. He wasn't the worst driver in 2021 or the 2020 season. He was a top 15 driver in 2020 easily. He even had a pole position. Sergio Perez was a top 5 driver in that season. And listen, Stroll was sometimes there, sometimes even better. So Lance Stroll was a perfectly good, perfectly decent driver. He earned his spot at the 2021 grid, 2021 calendar, 2021 team. Now, do I think that he will stick around until 2030? I think he will keep improving, but he is in a bad spot, declining team. His teammate is kind of a bigger star, but his teammate is also declining. I think too much to overcome. And at the end of the day, come 2030, he will be 32 years old. He will be an average driver, maybe even a little bit above average, but he will be just too old and too meh. He's not like a Fernando Alonso. Well, that's a great comparison because Fernando Alonso is one of the greatest drivers of all time, but Fernando Alonso can make a shitty car look good. Lance Stroll, I don't think so. So here is a no next to Lance Stroll. Now, next up was my toughest decision. It was Pierre Gasly, because Pierre Gasly to me is literally Nico Hulkenberg on steroids. So he's like, I can clearly see Pierre Gasly being a Nico Hulkenberg, just driving and being good, being a top 10 driver, but never winning a championship, never having an opportunity to win a championship, and therefore he will just get more expensive, more older, and less attractive. But Pierre Gasly has a plus. He has already a race victory, and he has 9 seasons until 2030 to win more races, to have more podiums. Therefore, I had to go with Pierre Gasly. He's really improving, and I put a yes next to his head. And the last 2 drivers here are Nicholas Latifi. By the way, let me just mention that Pierre would be 34 years old come 2030, so that's pretty okay. And in my opinion, that's why he will stick around. Nicholas Latifi would be 35, so just like Gio, he isn't really young. And unlike Gio, he's actually getting completely destroyed by his teammate. I think he had a better performance in Bahrain this year than, let's say, last year. He's getting better. But yeah, I don't think that Nicholas will stick around. He's just kind of meh. And of course, it's all about George Russell. When it comes to Williams, George Russell, I think he is the next star in Mercedes. Everybody wants to see Russell versus Hamilton 2022. Valtteri Bottas is getting completely overlooked. But yeah, also myself, I would love to see Russell versus Hamilton. How many years, how many races can Lewis Hamilton fend off the new and charging George Russell? And of course, George would be also only 32 years old in 2030, so that's a plus for him. So yeah, that's pretty much it. What do you think? Who will stick around until 2030? Let me know in the comment section. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Cut.